Okay, hey, it's Mr. Shrum, and I am back to finish the factors that affect biodiversity tutorial. And we left off at the environmental changes in biodiversity section. So, as the environment changes, biodiversity might change as well. There are several major issues threatening biodiversity today. Extinction. Although it's a natural phenomenon, crucial to the process of evolution, it's also a major threat to biodiversity. Extinction can be defined as the end of an entire species of an animal or a plant. Extinction rate refers to the estimation of extinction and is generally expressed as extinctions per year. The process of extinction can be divided into two types: background extinction and mass extinction. So let's get into what background extinction is. Here you can see dodos being depicted. Dodo birds that inhabited Mauritius Island in East Africa became extinct around the late 17th century. It's believed that overhunting and human-introduced invasive species that preyed on dodo eggs and competed with the birds for food led to the dodo's extinction. Background extinction is a natural ongoing phenomenon. It happens at a slow pace and for many reasons. Some species just can't adapt to environmental changes, while others find it difficult to compete for food with a new species. Still, others might fall prey to diseases or a natural disaster such as a storm or fire. Scientists estimate that 1 to 5 species every year go extinct as a result of background extinction. On the other hand, mass extinction, this occurs when large proportions of species go extinct in a short span of time. 5 of these mass extinction events have occurred throughout history. And the last one, the Cretaceous Tertiary extinction, was about 65 million years ago. In this mass extinction, about 50% or half of Earth's species disappeared, including most of the dinosaurs. Scientists believe that most of the earlier mass extinction events were due to a physical force, such as a volcanic eruption, falling sea levels, or other environmental changes. And here we go. If you look at the peaks, those peaks indicate the 5 mass extinction events that occurred over the past 500 million years. So think of this bottom axis as measuring millions of years ago. And as you go further back, that's the older the extinction is. So here's the youngest extinction, all the way to the end Ordovician extinction. If you're curious, I would look those up. Current mass extinction rates are about 40 times the normal background extinction rate. Although much of this extinction rate is strongly correlated to human activities, these activities aren't necessarily the reason for mass extinction. But a leading hypothesis cites human intervention as one of the causes of the ongoing mass extinction rate. For example, the graph measures species extinction from 1800 to 2010. It clearly shows that species extinction has increased with the increase in human population. Therefore, human intervention is most likely responsible for the ongoing high extinction rate. This blue pale line shows human population in millions, and the black line would be the extinctions. And you see that there is a correlation. In addition to human intervention, several other factors can contribute to mass extinction. For example, suppose many animal species live on an island. Some of these species have no natural predators. Then, a natural predator species, such as rats, traveling on visiting ships, enters the island. The island's native species wouldn't have many means of escape because they're on an island, and the predators could easily wipe out the native species. So some of these things are very delicate. All right, so in this question, we're asked to name 2 human activities and explain how they could threaten or endanger species. So think of human activities that involve habitats or animals to some degree. And our sample answers, we have, as humans, we have introduced invasive species into regions both for a purpose and by accident. These species can threaten the native species. Burning of fossil fuels can also threaten biodiversity. Fossil fuel emissions can pollute natural areas, triggering the decline of susceptible populations. So those are 2 examples, and I think you can find more too. As discussed earlier, human intervention is believed to cause the increased extinction rate. To understand how human intervention contributes to mass extinction, let's analyze the factors that threaten biodiversity. So here we have 6 factors that affect biodiversity. And note that all of these factors are directly or indirectly related to humans. So let's check these out. The first one is exploitation of resources and organisms. Humans hunt animals for meat, fur, leather. Humans also remove animals from their natural habitat, either to keep as pets or to use the animals as products. In addition to this, humans indirectly affect animals by clearing forests and other habitats for construction, lumber, and farming. These factors ultimately threaten the survival of animal species. Habitat loss. Sometimes natural disasters like floods, earthquakes, and droughts can destroy species as natural habitats. Human activities such as deforestation and pollution also affect natural habitats. Without adequate habitat and resources, species can't grow, reproduce, or survive, leading to a decline in biodiversity. Sometimes a habitat undergoes a significant change rather than being lost, and we refer to that as habitat disruption. Some species can't adapt to changes in the environment, and if these species go extinct, it affects other organisms that depend on that species, causing a type of domino effect. Human actions often cause habitat disruptions. For example, building a dam can greatly affect an ecosystem. Fish may die as they're pulled into the dam. The obstructed water flow can change the water's pH, temperature, and dissolved oxygen, creating unfavorable conditions for growth and reproduction of the species that live in it. Habitat fragmentation involves carving large habitats into smaller isolated areas. So species are then split into geographically isolated populations. And these populations, now isolated, may evolve differently and form distinct species. And that is a process known as speciation. Speciation can form new populations that can't interbreed. So habitat fragmentation decreases an animal's chance of finding an unrelated mate. These events eventually decrease diversity, making the species susceptible to diseases and other stress factors. Climate change. Climatic conditions are changing because of humans. Because of human activities such as the burning of oil, natural gas, and other fossil fuels. Burning these fuels releases greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Increased greenhouse gas levels are linked to an increase in the average global temperature. Climate change, although gradual, has wide-ranging effects on biodiversity. Higher temperatures can change growing seasons, affecting animals that depend on plants for food. Temperature changes can also affect mutualistic relationships, such as that of flowering plants and their pollinators. Warmer temperatures may cause flowers to bloom before pollinators are active. Temperature changes also encourage new plants or animals to move into an area. These species are often invasive and compete with or prey on the native species. And in addition to that, some species may be unable to adapt to the changing environment and go extinct. So climate change is one of the bigger and more pressing instances. And pollution, of course, another big one. Human activities such as burning fossil fuels releases toxic chemicals into the atmosphere. These chemicals concentrate in the tissues of carnivores that occupy higher trophic levels in the food chain by the process of biological magnification or biomagnification. In the 1960s, the chemical DDT, or if you want to try to pronounce that, dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane, or DDT for short. Yeah, just stick with DDT. That was used in insecticides, nearly caused the extinction of the American bald eagle by biomagnification, because the eagles would eat smaller prey that had concentrations of DDT in them. Another effect of pollution is acid rain. Atmospheric pollutants such as sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides react with water and oxygen to form acids. These acids mix with rainwater and enter water systems, making the water toxic for aquatic animals. Similarly, fertilizers, which are rich in nitrogen and phosphorus, run off into water systems and cause excessive growth of algae. This process is called eutrophication. Other organisms die when the algae use all of the dissolved oxygen in the water. So we have an activity here. In this activity, you'll analyze the invasion of gypsy moths in the United States. You'll also examine the moths impact on the biodiversity of US ecosystems? So this is a gypsy moth. They're native to Europe, but invasive in the United States. Their larvae, or young, eat a high volume of tree leaves. The larva can destroy between 60 to 100% of leaves, a process known as defoliation. Without leaves, trees can't perform photosynthesis. So they are preventing trees from being able to capture the nutrients they need. A group of scientists monitored the population of gypsy moths and the rate of defoliation in one US region over a 4-year period. Their collected data appears in the chart. So let's look at that data. But I encourage you to work through that, or I may do a separate video for this type of activity. But that's an example of looking at numbers and analyzing the data and then visually telling what the data shows in a graph and interpreting the data from there. So we can move on to science in the news, the coral reef regeneration. Many people are taking action to protect biodiversity in ecosystems. One example is coral reefs, which have been heavily damaged by the effects of climate change, pollution, and other human activities. Conservationists are working to protect these fragile ecosystems, some of the most diverse places on the planet. And I always think of Finding Nemo or SpongeBob when I look at coral reefs. But we're going to learn about coral bleaching. And if you look at corals, here's what a healthy coral is supposed to look like. Somewhat colorful, and sometimes these skeletons can be bleached. So we'll look at what that means exactly. Corals are marine invertebrates. They secrete calcium carbonate to form hard skeletons. And these skeletons make up coral reefs. So what you're seeing are skeletons. Corals live in a symbiotic relationship with tiny, colorful algae called zooxanthellae. The algae live inside the corals and produce food through photosynthesis. They provide corals with the food they need and give them much of their color. In turn, corals provide the algae with shelter and the nutrients required for photosynthesis. Climate change, however, has disrupted this relationship. And when that relationship is disrupted, the algae is no longer able to live on the coral, and the coral loses its color. And because of increased levels of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, ocean temperatures have been increasing. Warmer water temperatures cause the corals to become stressed and expel the algae. If temperatures return to normal, corals will regain the algae. But if water temperatures stay high, the absence of algae starves the corals and strips them of their color, leaving them white and vulnerable to disease. And that is called coral bleaching. So see how sad they look when they're not colorful? So now we have a video about coral reef regeneration. more islands. Oh, they actually, yeah. And here we see the bleached coral. And then they develop, but that is pretty cool. So they referred to coral as like the rainforest of the sea. And that's a good way to look at it. If we lose the rainforest, you're losing a lot of biodiversity. A lot of species live in the rainforest, and in the sea, the coral also supports the ecosystems there. And if you lose the coral reefs, that can damage a lot of other species as well. But that's an example of scientists investigating, looking at things up close, and then finding a way to regenerate coral. Pretty cool. But if you want to watch the full video, I say go and watch it. And now I think we have the summary video, and you can watch that. But I hope that was helpful. That is the end of factors that affect biodiversity. Some pretty interesting stuff in there, stuff you'll see in the news, and I'm sure you will continue to see these types of efforts to curb or stop pollution or climate change and habitat loss and habitat disruption or fragmentation. And hopefully you understand that everything is part of a system, and humans need other species just as much as we need other things to survive. Because either directly or indirectly, we depend on one another. And yeah, that's about it. So I will leave that with you, and we'll get started on something else next time. All right, see you later. And stop meeting. See ya.